Hulk Hogan NWO, July 7th, 1996, Bash at the Beach, the leg drop heard around the world. Hulk Hogan, the red and yellow hero of the 1980s, walked down to the ring, supposedly to save WCW from the invading outsiders. Instead, he dropped the leg on Macho Man Randy Savage, dropped fans' jaws in the arena, and dropped his legacy in a vat of black spray paint. With a single act, Hogan turned heel for the first time in over a decade and joined Kevin Nash and Scott Hall to form the New World Order. Fans threw trash into the ring. Hogan threw out any pretense of saying his prayers or eating his vitamins. Wrestling had never seen a bigger heel turn, nor one that immediately redefined a company's identity. WCW became cool. Hogan became Hollywood. And wrestling in general got a little more real. If kayfabe was cracking before, this smashed it with a steel chair. The NWO changed everything. And it all started with Hulkamania dying on live TV, Stone Cold, WrestleMania 10-7, Houston, the Astrodome, Stone Cold, Steve Austin, the anti-authority face of the Attitude Era, shakes hands with the very devil he spent years stunning. Vince McMahon helps Austin beat The Rock in the main event and reclaim the WWE Championship. And in the process, heel turns the most beloved rebel in the company. And the crowd cheers, sort of. It was confusing, kind of like turning Batman into the Joker. Austin himself has admitted it was the wrong call, and fans never quite accepted it. But what makes this heel turn monumental isn't just the moment, it's the aftermath. Austin's character unraveled into a paranoid, singing, guitar-playing villain who hugged Vince and whined constantly. The move marked the end of the Attitude Era and the start of something far weirder. It didn't ruin Austin's legacy, but it absolutely put a question mark on his arc. Like, yes, we liked chaos, but not this kind of chaos. Not Austin plays the kazoo with Kurt Angle chaos. Seth Rollins, The Shield. June 2nd, 2014, the Night Brotherhood died. Seth Rollins, the so-called architect of The Shield, proved he had in fact drawn up the blueprints for betrayal. Roman Reigns and Dean Ambrose stood united after conquering Evolution, and then from behind came the chair shots. Multiple, unforgiving, cold. Triple H's smug approval sealed the deal. Rollins had traded injustice for a briefcase and a black suit. This wasn't just a heel turn, it was a calculated demolition of the hottest faction WWE had built in years. Fans were shocked, not because someone turned, but who turned? Everyone expected Ambrose, some suspected Reigns. Nobody saw Rollins coming. It catapulted Seth into a new tier and set the course for WWE's main event scene for the next half-decade. But it also kicked off a recurring theme in Rollins' career. He's brilliant, he's beloved, and just when you trust him, he ruins everything. Like a human 450 splash of betrayal. Vince McMahon, Higher Power, June 7th, 1999. One of the most bizarre story payoffs in WWE history ends with Vince McMahon unveiling himself as the higher power behind the evil Ministry of Darkness. For months, this shadowy cult, led by the already terrifying Undertaker, had been kidnapping people, hanging folks on crucifixes, and talking about dark forces. The twist? It was all part of a convoluted plan by Vince to get revenge on Stone Cold. Again. Because regular revenge, lawsuits and steel cage matches just weren't enough. Vince needed a rope. The heel turn was baffling, not because Vince turned heel. He was basically born that way, but because he had been feuding with the ministry the entire time. The storytelling logic collapsed, fans groaned, Jim Ross groaned, but in the long term, it became iconic in the same way bad movies become cult classics. Vince turning heel in a satanic cult storyline shouldn't have worked, but neither should pro wrestling, and here we are. Shawn Michaels. January 11th, 1992. The Rockers were no more, and neither was Marty Jannetty's career momentum. Shawn Michaels' heel turn is remembered less for what he said and more for what he did. Smile warmly, raise Jannetty's hand, and then smash his head through Brutus Beefcake's glass window. It was clean, cruel, and historic. Michaels instantly went from pretty boy tag team guy to egomaniacal heartbreak kid. It was a betrayal that set the tone for the 1990s, high drama, high risk, and low moral fiber. What's wild is how effective this moment was in defining two careers. Shawn, went on to be a main event legend. Marty became the punchline for any wrestler who didn't break out post-tag team. This was more than a heel turn, it was a career trajectory shift, executed with one perfectly timed pane of fake glass and a mullet full of ambition. Truly, this was the WWE version of a boy band breakup. If NSYNC ended with Justin Timberlake powerbombing Lance Bass through a storefront, The Rock corporate Survivor Series 1998 wasn't just a tournament, it was a Shakespearean tragedy with steel chairs. The Rock entered the night as the fan favourite People's Champion. By the end, he was shaking hands with Vince McMahon and leaving with the WWE Championship. And no soul. It was a swerve so sudden fans didn't boo immediately, they just tried to compute what they'd witnessed. Rock had been betrayed by Vince weeks earlier. Vince had openly favoured Mankind. Then, out of nowhere, The Rock locked in a phony sharpshooter, Vince called for the bell, and we got a Survivor Series-sized remix of the Montreal Screwjob. The Rock sold out. The corporation had their new golden boy, and the audience had whiplash. This wasn't just a heel turn, it was a genius pivot. It positioned Rock as a corporate puppet until he evolved into the slick, eyebrow-raising deity of charisma we remember today. A villain so smooth, you didn't want to boo him, you wanted to quote him. Triple H, the game. What started as a tasteless storyline ended as a career-altering heel turn. In 1999, Triple H drugged Stephanie McMahon, drove her to a Las Vegas wedding chapel, and fake married her on camera. It was bad. Like, should have been cancelled in 2001 bad, but then came the twist. Stephanie liked it. She turned on her dad Vince, revealing that the marriage wasn't fake. It was part of a larger evil plan. Suddenly, Triple H wasn't just a degenerate with a sledgehammer, he was a political mastermind with the company's princess on his arm. This launched the McMahon-Helmsley era, a golden age of long promos, even longer title reigns, and pedigree-related trauma. Triple H solidified himself as the game, ruthless, cerebral, and allergic to putting over babyfaces clean. This heel turn was so effective that fans still half believe he married Stephanie in real life, just for the power. And honestly, respect. Roman Reigns, Tribal Chief, August 2020. Roman Reigns comes back from hiatus, spears everyone in sight, and aligns with Paul Heyman. For years, WWE had tried to push Roman as the next big babyface. Fans rejected him, but now he wasn't asking for cheers. He was demanding acknowledgement. The Tribal Chief gimmick flipped the entire Roman experiment on its head, and it worked. Instead of corny catchphrases and suffering succotash, we got cold, methodical dominance. Roman gaslit his family, choked out his cousins, and emotionally manipulated the entire Samoan dynasty into obeying him. It was ruthless, it was brilliant, and it gave us one of the most compelling long-term stories in modern WWE history. Heel Roman isn't just a character, it's what happens when creative finally listens to the crowd, weaponizes rejection, and turns it into pure gold. Also, shout out to Paul Heyman, who somehow managed to play second fiddle to two of the greatest champions of the last 30 years, and made both look untouchable. Andre the Giant. It took one necklace, snatch, and a silent glare. That's all Andre the Giant needed to turn heel. Leading up to WrestleMania 3, Andre had been portrayed as a gentle giant, Hogan's friend, a locker room legend, undefeated for 15 years. Then came Piper's Pit, where Andre aligned with Bobby the Brain Heenan and challenged Hogan for the title. The betrayal was subtle but seismic. Hogan, ever the melodramatic performer, responded by clutching his crucifix as if someone had just dropkicked Jesus. Fans were stunned. This was Andre. You don't turn Andre heel unless you're building the biggest match in wrestling history, which they were. WrestleMania 3 broke attendance records, gave us the immortal image of Hogan slamming Andre, and reminded us that even legends can break hearts and maybe neck chains. Andre's heel turn didn't need a chair shot or a promo, just presence and a death stare that said, "I'm done carrying this company on my back, now I'm going to sit on yours." Randy Orton. In 2003, Randy Orton was still known more for his cheekbones than his legacy. But then came the moment that changed it all. Orton spat in Mick Foley's face, literally. Then he RKO'd him into irrelevance, or so he thought. The real turning point came in 2004, when Foley returned and dragged Orton into a hardcore war that forced the Legend Killer to actually earn that nickname. At Backlash, Orton beat Foley in a brutal match full of barbed wire, thumbtacks, and psychological scarring. That was the moment Orton officially arrived and stayed at the top. This wasn't just a heel turn, it was a full evolution, pun intended, from promising rookie to cold-blooded sociopath. He punted legends, he kissed unconscious women, he burned down Bray Wyatt's house. And it all started with disrespecting Mick Foley, the human crash test dummy of WWE. If you're going to betray someone, betray the guy who made a career out of falling off things. That way, no matter what happens, he'll sell it like death. CM Punk, voice of the voiceless. CM Punk's heel turns are complicated, plural. But in 2012, it wasn't a chair shot or a screw job. It was a slow moral decay wrapped in a pipe bomb aftershock. Punk had returned as the people's champion, voice of the voiceless, and a guy who wore stone cold merch unironically. But then he started demanding respect. More respect, even more respect. And when that didn't come fast enough, he aligned with Paul Heyman, attacked The Rock, and cut increasingly bitter promos about how the fans never truly appreciated him. Which, to be fair, was kind of true. Punk's heel turn wasn't explosive, it was surgical. He didn't change overnight, he eroded. Like a guy who started a band to fight the system and then licensed his biggest hit to a car commercial. He held the WWE Championship for 434 days, but by the end, he wasn't fighting for the fans. He was fighting the fans. And he was winning, until The Rock showed up and turned heel Punk into just another footnote in the Great One's third act playlist. Bayley, hugger, gimmick. Bayley was the living embodiment of innocence, side ponytail, inflatable tube men, and the kind of optimism that made you feel bad for swearing near her entrance. Then 2019 happened. One haircut, one steel chair to Becky Lynch. And suddenly Bayley was not nice anymore. This wasn't a sudden betrayal. It was a full identity assassination. The beloved children's role model came back looking like she sold essential oils door to door and cut promos about how the fans never deserved her in the first place. And you know what? It worked. Role model Bayley was sarcastic, bitter, and dangerously competent. She tore through the women's division with a smug grin and a pandemic-era MVP energy. She proved that even the most bubblegum characters can go dark if the lighting's just right. Plus, she killed the Bayley Buddies live on SmackDown with a knife. If that's not commitment to the bit, nothing is. It was the slowest, most effective descent into villainy this side of a Pixar sequel, Brock Lesnar. Let's rewind. In 2004, Eddie Guerrero pulled off a miracle. He beat Brock Lesnar clean and became WWE champion. It was one of the most heartfelt underdog wins in company history. Flash forward to 2022. Eddie's spiritual successor, Rey Mysterio, brings out his son Dominic. They're facing Judgment Day. Suddenly Brock Lesnar's music hits and the air chills. In one of the most casually cruel heel turns of the decade, Brock decimates Rey and Dominic, reigniting the memory of the guy who once tried to end Eddie's Cinderella story with a suplex. This wasn't a traditional heel turn, this was a reminder. Brock Lesnar doesn't turn. He shows up, destroys your childhood, and leaves. His betrayal of Rey, and by proxy, Eddie's legacy, wasn't just storyline convenient. It was a thematic gut punch, like if your childhood bully came back at age 40, took your lunch money again, and F5'd your dad in front of you. Twice. Becky Lynch, the man. At SummerSlam 2018, Becky Lynch snapped, and fans rejoiced after Charlotte Flair inserted herself into Becky's title opportunity and won the match. Becky had enough of playing second fiddle. She turned around, slapped Charlotte into next week, and walked out to the biggest heel turn pop since Steve Austin handed Vince a beer. WWE wanted Becky to be the villain. The crowd turned her into the hero. Within weeks, she was cutting scathing promos, breaking faces, and calling herself the man. This wasn't just a character shift, it was an entire division pivot. Becky became the nucleus of WWE's women's evolution. Her swagger, her bloodied nose on Raw, her WrestleMania 35 main event. It all started with that heel turn that didn't quite heal. It blurred the line between rebellion and righteousness. Like if Batman started punching cops and the whole city applauded. Becky didn't betray the fans, she betrayed WWE's patience. And they never really forgave her, in the best way. Edge. Before he was a rated R superstar, Edge was a tag team darling, one half of a beloved goofy duo that liked sunglasses and ladders. But at WrestleMania 10-7, Edge became something else. During a jaw-dropping TLC match, Jeff Hardy dangled from the tag titles above the ring like a human chandelier. And then wham! Edge launched himself from another ladder, spearing Hardy mid-air and sending him crashing to earth in one of the most iconic spots in WWE history. The crowd exploded. The replay played for years. But make no mistake, this was the moment Edge fully embraced his destiny as a villain. Over time, the ladders got replaced by sneak attacks. The charisma got darker, the smiles got smug. He slept with Lita, betrayed everyone, and invented the ultimate opportunist blueprint. But it all began here, with a mid-air missile of malice, one spear, two ruined spines, and a career path paved in treachery and TLC. Chris Jericho. If heel turns are art, this one was a masterpiece with a glass canvas. In 2008, Chris Jericho reinvented himself, trading in flashy jackets and Y2J antics for cold suits, dead-eyed promos, and a vocabulary that would make a thesaurus sweat. His slow burn feud with Shawn Michaels was already tense, but the turning point came on the highlight reel. After weeks of passive-aggressive sermons about hypocrisy and hero worship, Jericho finally snapped and smashed HBK's face into the Geritron 5000. That's a flat-screen TV, by the way, not a mystical relic. The moment was sudden, brutal, and dangerously real. Michael suffered a legit eye injury, and the fans, they went from booing Jericho to fearing him. This wasn't just a heel turn, it was Jericho burning every remnant of his crowd-pandering past and replacing it with smug, intellectual rage. The scarf era had begun, and the message was clear. If you cheer too hard, someone's going through electronics. Trish Stratus. Trish Stratus, beloved Canadian icon, trailblazer for women's wrestling, and low-key manipulator of hearts. In early 2004, Chris Jericho had developed a crush on Trish, and like every romantic subplot in wrestling, it started with a bet. Jericho and Christian each wagered a loonie on who could seduce which diva first. Somehow, this escalated into Jericho falling for Trish for real, feuding with Christian, and ending up in a WrestleMania love triangle. After Jericho lost the match, Trish came down to the ring. Fans assumed she'd comfort him. Instead, she slapped him across the face and kissed Christian loudly. This was the Attitude Era's version of The Bachelor, and the heel turn was the rose ceremony from hell. Trish's betrayal wasn't a chair shot or a sneak attack. It was worse, it was emotional. It made Jericho sympathetic, which is basically a miracle, and it gave Trish her first real taste of villainy. She wore it well. Betrayal never looked so well conditioned. Daniel Bryan, yes movement. Daniel Bryan, scrappy underdog, vegan role model, conqueror of the authority, but by late 2018 he was sick of being cheered, so he did what any eco-friendly wrestling messiah would do. He stomped a guy's head in and yelled at everyone for using plastic. After low-blowing AJ Styles to win the WWE Championship, Bryan unveiled his new persona, the new Daniel Bryan, a bitter, self-righteous prophet who carried a hemp belt and called fans parasites. It was like Captain Planet got tenure and stopped pretending to like people. This heel turn was brilliant because it weaponized Bryan's real-life beliefs, environmentalism, clean living, disdain for corporate nonsense, and made them insufferable. Suddenly, the guy who once fought for the people was judging them for not composting. The yes movement wasn't just over. It had been composted, mulched, and recycled into something sinister. Bryan took the most beloved babyface run of the modern era and turned it heel by caring too hard. That takes talent and possibly Kale, the Bella twins. Twin magic only lasts so long. At SummerSlam 2014, Nikki Bella turned on her sister Brie, costing her a high-stakes match against Stephanie McMahon. The betrayal was swift, loud, and televised to millions. Brie's face said it all: confusion, heartbreak, and probably a little whiplash. Nikki followed it up with one of the most memorably awkward heel promos of all time, screaming that Brie was dead to her and always stealing the spotlight, even in the womb. This was sibling rivalry turned nuclear. Suddenly, the Bellas weren't glamorous reality TV twins. They were Kane and Abel in crop tops. Nikki leaned fully into the villain role, aligning with the Authority, calling fans losers, and adding at least 3 inches to her heel boots. Meanwhile, Brie kept getting shoved around. The storyline was soap opera madness, but it worked. It helped relaunch the Divas division, paved the way for Nikki's solo success, and reminded us that no one does betrayal quite like someone with matching DNA. Mark Henry, World's Strongest Slam. This one deserves an Oscar, a Slammy, and a medal for emotional manipulation. In 2013, Mark Henry came to Raw dressed in a salmon-coloured suit, holding back tears. He told the crowd he was retiring, he thanked the fans, he hugged John Cena. The whole segment was a masterclass in sincerity. And then boom, World's Strongest Slam. Cena got pancaked, the crowd gasped. Mark Henry ripped off the salmon jacket like it was a superhero costume, stood over Cena and yelled, "You think it's that easy? I got a lot left in the tank," and we believed him. Because we were played brilliantly, this wasn't just a heel turn, it was a con job. Henry's fake retirement became one of the most talked about segments of the decade. It was so good, people still second guess retirement speeches to this day. The salmon suit is now wrestling legend. Somewhere, a tailor frames that thing like the Mona Lisa of betrayal. Kane. Oh yes, the Attitude Era. A time when subtlety died and pyrotechnics ran the locker room. In 2003, Kane removed his mask and went full horror villain. He was bald, burned, and breathing fire like a Dragon Ball Z extra. But his most infamous moment came when he strapped Shane McMahon to a metal frame and electrocuted his, let's call them McNuggets. This wasn't just a heel turn, it was a felony on cable television. The feud that followed was peak early 2000s chaos. Exploding ambulances, staged funerals, and leaps off the Titantron that would bankrupt most local indie promotions. While Kane had turned heel before, this was the version that finally cemented him as WWE's resident monster. A silent, sadistic force of destruction who didn't need dialogue because a car battery to the groin said it all. In hindsight, Kane's heel turn was both over the top and unforgettable, and Shane's future children probably had questions. Batista, evolution. Batista's heel turn was the slowest, most glorious ticking time bomb in WWE history. In 2005, he was the muscle of evolution, a suit-wearing enforcer who stood behind Ric Flair and Triple H like a brick wall in sunglasses. But as Batista kept winning and flexing and powerbombing, the writing was on the wall. This guy wasn't staying in the background. The slow burn tension reached its peak when Triple H tried to manipulate Batista into facing JBL at WrestleMania instead of him. Batista saw through the ploy, gave the most satisfying thumbs down in WWE history, and spine-busted Triple H through a table like he was cancelling a bad group project. That moment turned Batista into a megastar, and, ironically, the most likable member of Evolution. It was technically a face turn, sure, but the betrayal flipped the script on Triple H, making him the sympathetic one for a split second. Powerbombing your mentor through mahogany furniture? Very heel. But doing it with a smile, that's main event material. Paul Bearer. Paul Bearer was the spooky uncle to The Undertaker's goth teenager. Together they were inseparable. Urn, druids, mystical lighting, everything a functioning wrestling relationship needs. But in 1996, Bearer decided he was tired of carrying around that heavy urn and joined up with Mankind instead. During the infamous Boiler Room Brawl at SummerSlam, Bearer turned on Taker by smashing him with the urn and laughing like a man who had just cancelled Halloween. The betrayal wasn't just shocking, it felt weirdly personal. Paul Bearer made The Undertaker. Literally. Later storylines even claimed Bearer was Taker's dad, because of course they did. The heel turn gave Taker his first real emotional feud, one that stretched across fireballs, buried alive matches, and eventually the introduction of Kane. This betrayal wasn't a cheap swerve. It was the spiritual divorce of WWE's darkest duo. Bearer didn't just turn on The Undertaker, he lit the entire supernatural rulebook on fire and used it as a promo. Austin Theory family. Austin Theory was the dumb little brother of the way. Johnny Gargano's found family stable of lovable weirdos and chaotic holiday segments. He was a golden retriever in human form, affable, confused, and prone to getting kidnapped. But as Theory rose up the WWE ladder and the abs got even more defined, he left the goofiness behind. And what better way to do that than by kicking your mentor directly in the Speed Force? Theory's heel turn on Gargano was a full-on graduation. Out went the family dinners and index weddings, in came the smug selfies, the Vince McMahon endorsements, and the obnoxious catchphrases about being the future. It wasn't just a betrayal, it was an identity swap. Theory turned on the man who gave him credibility, and in doing so, became a better heel than anyone expected. For a guy once kidnapped by Dexter Lumis and fed cereal by Candice LeRae, turning into a calculated villain was downright Shakespearean, if Shakespeare wrote TikToks. Big Show. If heel turns were an Olympic sport, Big Show would have the gold, silver, and bronze medals, plus a heel turn on the referee. But one of his earliest betrayals still stands out, his defection to the corporation in 1999. This was just after his debut, when he was still being marketed as the giant who could end Austin. And instead, he aligned with Vince McMahon and helped chokeslam Steve Austin out of a steel cage and into fiscal compliance. It wasn't the most emotional betrayal, but it was a tone setter. Big Show's alliance with the corporation made one thing clear. He was a mercenary, not a moral compass. The only thing you could trust Big Show to do was turn heel again in 6 weeks. But this one mattered. It inserted him right into the Attitude Era's power struggle and set the stage for a career defined by size, betrayal, and kayfabe mood swings. Safety glasses off, trust permanently broken. AJ Lee. Some heel turns allowed. This one was a whisper followed by gravity. At TLC 2012, John Cena was seconds away from winning the Money in the Bank briefcase during his match with Dolph Ziggler. And then, out of nowhere, AJ Lee skipped down to the ring, climbed the ladder, smiled at Cena, and pushed him off like he was expired produce. It was shocking, it was petty, and it was peak AJ. Just weeks earlier, she had been Raw's GM, then not GM, then romantically linked to Cena in a plotline that felt like HR bait. So naturally, she turned on him for reasons that were never quite explained, then immediately aligned with Ziggler, because nothing screams healthy rebound like bleaching your hair and super kicking people. AJ's heel turn wasn't about gold or grudges, it was chaos for chaos's sake, and it worked. The moment cemented her status as the crazy chick who made betrayal look cute and unhinged. Cena fell off the ladder, but AJ soared into icon status, skipping the whole way. Naomi, the bloodline. Okay, this one hasn't officially happened yet, but let's be honest, we've all fantasy booked it. Naomi, real-life wife of Jimmy Uso, turning heel and aligning with the bloodline will be the kind of long-term storytelling WWE dreams about, assuming they ever let women near the Roman Empire without a clipboard. But in 2022, Naomi did walk out of WWE alongside Sasha Banks in protest, and when she returned in 2024, fans immediately wondered, what if she came back with the bloodline? What if the glow turned red? The theory has legs. Naomi's athleticism, confidence, and genuine ties to the family would give the faction a fresh edge. Plus, a heel Naomi wouldn't need catchphrases or dance breaks, just power, presence, and one perfectly timed super kick to Bianca Belair. Whether WWE pulls the trigger or not, the idea of Naomi flipping the switch and going tribal is one of the most tantalizing what-ifs in modern wrestling. Sometimes, the best heel turns are the ones that live rent-free in your booking brain. Tamina. Tamina has turned heel so many times she could qualify for a revolving door endorsement. But somewhere in the 2021 timeline, something clicked. Teaming up with Natalya, Tamina finally shed the awkward silent muscle roll and leaned into her legacy. Equal parts intimidating, underused, and surprisingly sympathetic. When she turned on the fans, again, it wasn't met with groans. It was met with relief. Because for once, WWE let her do something. Her heel work during that tag title run didn't revolutionize the division, but it stabilized it. She stopped being the punchline and started being the threat. The boots looked heavier, the stare downs lingered longer, and when she hit the Superfly splash, it wasn't just homage, it was punctuation. Tamina's heel turn didn't change the industry overnight, but it did shift how fans saw her. From why is she still here to wait, is she kinda scary now? The answer, yes. And that's a heel victory in itself, Sami Zayn. Technically, Sami Zayn didn't turn heel here, he turned face, but it felt like a betrayal so intense, the emotional damage mirrored a classic villain moment. During the 2023 Royal Rumble, Sami, then a paranoid honorary member of the Bloodline, finally snapped. When Roman ordered him to beat down a handcuffed Kevin Owens, Sami hesitated. Then he swung the chair into Roman's back. The crowd detonated. Jey Uso stared at the floor like he'd just witnessed a Greek tragedy. It was a callback to Seth Rollins' betrayal of the Shield, and it landed just as hard. In storyline terms, Sami betrayed the faction he wanted to be in, his found family, and in doing so, he flipped the power dynamic of WWE's biggest angle. This wasn't a heel turn, it was the end of one. And that emotional whiplash, where fans cheered while clutching their hearts, was the kind of storytelling that makes wrestling unique. Sami didn't turn heel, he broke one, and probably fractured Roman's trust forever. The Miz. There's no heel turn in Miz's career because being a heel is his natural habitat. If Miz were cast in a Disney movie, he'd betray the protagonist in the second act, monologue about it, then pitch his own reality show during the third. But if we had to pick one iconic betrayal, it's the 2010 Raw Money in the Bank cash-in. Randy Orton was broken, battered, and baby-faced. Miz stormed in, skull-crushed him, and screamed, "I'm the Miz, and I'm awesome," to a symphony of furious boos. It was perfect. Miz's heel work isn't about brute force or deep grudges. It's about being the guy you know is going to stab someone in the back, and still somehow being surprised when he does. Whether he's turning on tag partners, fans, mentors, or his own sense of humility, Miz betrays because betrayal is branding. And in a business full of flip-flops, Miz has been consistently terrible, which somehow is kind of awesome. If you enjoyed this, hit the subscribe button because there's more coming your way.